The Crusaders, fighting for you.
DDTs, PCBs, hydrochloric acid, these are just a few of the toxic chemicals being dumped every day into our rivers. The rivers that supply the water we drink and the water our children swim in. The rivers that are now poisoning us. We are crusading to save them and save ourselves by cutting off this toxic tide. It's been written that if there's magic on this planet, it's contained in water. If that's true, then there's a lot of magic in the United States. The U.S. Geological Survey says more than 1 trillion gallons of water flow through our rivers and streams every single day. Some rivers run fast, others are frozen in time. They reflect the seasons and our cities. They mirror our concern for the environment or lack of it. Some say we've treated our rivers the way a junkie treats his veins. Listen to top environmental lawyer Robert Kennedy Jr.
Where polluters dump into the river for years and future generations have to pay for the cleanup or have to pay in health costs or new technologies for removing toxics from water. And we're saying you can't continue to impose these burdens on future generations.
Take the case of the Hudson River. Back in the 1960s, it was considered a dead river.
Yeah, there was a time on the Hudson where, every toilet was a tributary. I mean, they just all flowed to the Hudson River.
That was before John Cronin became the Hudson's river keeper.
The main thing we do is we investigate polluters. We investigate problems on the Hudson, and we don't just cry about it and whine about it. We do something about it.
Since 1983, Cronin has been patrolling up and down the river, investigating tips from Hudson Valley residents and looking for evidence of polluters. They're all carefully plotted on his office map.
It's amazing that we have to sit across the table from full-grown adults who have been in this world a long time, many of them longer than I, and say, you're supposed to clean up the mess you make. And that's what this whole operation's about. I mean, everything we do, as complex and crazy as it gets, from the Exxon company to a power plant to some little gun club, all it's about is, if you make a mess, you got to clean it up. We all put this document together
to make Exxon stop rinsing its oil tankers in the Hudson, to make the town of Newburgh stop illegally discharging waste, Cronin uses existing environmental law to force polluters into compliance.
Is there anything that we can go after them on under the Freedom of Information law?
That's where Kennedy and the Pace University Legal Clinic come in.
The river keeper is a symbol that human beings, that the people of the state, the little people, own that river. And for most of us, it's the biggest thing we're ever going to own. And when General Electric puts PCBs into the river and destroys the fish, they're stealing from us. That's an act of theft. And when somebody puts toxics into that river and those go into a water supply system and get into a child's breakfast drink, that's child abuse. And those people ought to be treated as criminals. And environmental law is real law, and it should be prosecuted like real law, because they are stealing from society, they're stealing from us.
The Riverkeeper program has been amazingly successful. It literally has helped to bring the Hudson back to life. Other rivers aren't so fortunate.
This is the 8th year that we are putting forward to the public the list of the nation's 10 most endangered rivers.
Kevin Coyle is executive director of American Rivers, an environmental group dedicated to saving our water. This year, their top 10 list includes the mighty Mississippi, again.
Where the lower parts of the river are called by some toxic alley.
Take a trip with us down this chemical corridor. More than 100 factories and cities dump pollutants directly into the Mississippi, making Louisiana the most polluted state in America. It wasn't always this way. Sonny King remembers a very different river.
So every day that we ate, it was thanks to the Mississippi River.
Sonny grew up on the banks of the Mississippi. His family ate from the river, drank from it, even baptized babies in it.
And they would sing spiritual song all the way to where they're going to go and take the people for the baptism right in the Mississippi River. So see, not only do we depend on this river for survival as far as food goes, it meant a lot to us spiritually as well.
But today, there is nothing holy about this water.
There are more toxic waste discharged in the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans than in the remainder of the United States.
Dr. Paul Tomplay is a professor of environmental studies at Louisiana State University. He says there's a long list of chemicals being dumped into the Mississippi.
A lot of acids, weak acids like phosphoric acid, sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, PCBs, DDTs, heavy metals, they find those in the river. 150 million to 200 million pounds of toxic chemicals. That's not all of them, that's just the toxic chemicals.
The river is poison now. What once was a source of life is now a source of death. And that makes Sonny King mad.
It's like taking a part of our family. This river belonged to us, and they're trying to take it away.
Sonny would like to take the river back. So would Mary Lee Orr.
Some national folks talked about where I lived as the bottom of the toilet.
Mary Lee is the director of the Louisiana Environmental Action Network.
I think if the river could sing, it would have a very sad song right now because of what's happening to it. And so I think we want to protect it and restore it, of course, to the beautiful river that Mark Twain talked about. Now I think Mark Twain would cry if he were writing his book.
The Crusaders wanted to help restore life on the Mississippi so that the fish and the birds and the 20 million Americans who depend on the river for water and food could use it without fear of contamination. John Cronin had fought this battle before. We knew his Riverkeeper program had to be part of our solution.
If you could turn around the Mississippi, I believe that you could turn around the environmental quality of the whole country.
So we made it our crusade to bring the Riverkeeper program to the Mississippi.
If we could have that, it would be beyond our wildest dreams. It would make us, empower us to the point, it would be like throwing a stone in a pond. The ripples would never end.
Cronin was good at making waves, so we brought him down to the Mississippi. We rented a boat so Mary Lee could show him the problem up close. It was a frightening tour.
So the river is sending us a message, but I guess it's sending us a message to get more riverkeepers.
Cronin told Mary Lee how to set up an effective Riverkeeper program, how one person with the support of the community can make these giant corporations clean up their act.
They're not going to do it on their own. So what you got to do is you got to put the law on their face and say, we're here to enforce the law. The rule of law is what we all have to obey. And that's what we try and do in the Riverkeeper project.
It is a beginning, a reason for Mary Lee Orr and Sonny King to hope that someday the river will be restored to the one Mark Twain wrote about, the river he called the majestic, the magnificent Mississippi.
I'd like to see a rebirth of some parts of this river through the Riverkeepers program.
Yeah.
And you'd have to come back, celebrate.
I'll come back. I'll come back. New life on the Mississippi.
That's right. That's great.
Our crusade is not over. The first step was establishing a Riverkeeper on the lower Mississippi. Now the Riverkeeper needs a boat, and we will continue our crusade until we get one.
Thanks, Carla. The Crusaders will be back in a moment. Stay with us.